Good morning to you all. I am Mandira Shrestha and I work for the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development located in Kathmandu, Nepal. I'm the program coordinator of Climate Services Initiative. I'm delighted to be here at this conference, which is very, very important. And I'm very much looking forward to presenting on the high mountains of the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, talking about disaster risk reduction and climate services. So what are the key issues in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region? Well, when looking at the Himalayan region, it's a very mountainous region and we have different types of hazards. When we talk about hazards, we have floods, we have landslides, we have avalanches, glacial lake outbursts, floods, earthquakes. So primarily we live in a multi-hazard environment. And also these hazards are very much connected from upstream to downstream. So there is linkages between the hazards that are occurring and there's cascading impacts. And the climate change and variability is very much affecting and impacting the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Another point I would like to here highlight, particularly because it is in a very mountainous region, very remote, connectivity and physical access is a big challenge, and governance issues and institutions and capacities are also limited. Now, when you're looking at the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, a report that was launched in 2019 by ISIMOD, it's called the HIMAP report, the Hindu Kush Himalayan Assessment Report. We consider that as a mini IPCC. It indicates that if it's a world of 1.5 degrees, then in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, the glaciers are going to lose their mass by 1/3 of their volume. And that is alarming by 2100. And if you're looking at it in terms of business as usual, then 2/3 of the volume under the current emission trends will be lost. So it is quite alarming in terms of looking at the snow cover areas and the snow cover volumes, which are very much going to be depleted and decreasing over the years. Now, we are also looking at and also seeing in the region is that the disaster risks are very much increasing. The report that I mentioned, the HIMAP report, also talks about that more than 1 billion people are at risk of exposure to increase of extremes, floods and droughts. And out of all the different types of disasters I mentioned earlier, 1/3 of all the disasters are counted by floods alone. And most of these flood disasters are transboundary in nature. That is, there's shared vulnerabilities across borders. And as we all know, like in all different types of disasters, men and women are affected differently. There's differential impacts of disasters in the region, which requires particular attention. Now, together with this, there are several challenges that are there in order to address. First, there is an increase in the intensity and frequency of flood disasters, primarily, climate change and variability has to contribute towards it, but also other drivers are there. Also, in the high mountain areas, there's inadequate climate observing networks. So the station network density is very sparse, and the data that is existing in the region is not only sparse, but there is also limited sharing of this data and information across the borders. Now, in terms of the capacity in the region, as far as working together, it is varying, particularly in terms of climate services. Yeah, so the capacity in the region is very much different from country to country, and what we require is that whatever services that are being designed needs to be very much tailored to the needs of the users. Often there are many services that are in place, but when it's not being used by the users, it is of little use. So these services need to be actionable as well as gender responsive. So along with these challenges come a number of opportunities also. Definitely, there are different partners that are there. So there is an opportunity to enhance partnerships in science and delivery of the products and services. There's also an opportunity to build capacity, learn and co-create innovative solutions to understand and interpret the use of these various climate products that are being generated. Particularly in high altitude areas where data is very sparse, Earth observations provides an opportunity, and geospatial tools, particularly for monitoring, for assessing and forecasting. Now, the climate data information that are existing in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, we very much require it to be harmonized. Right now, it is very much scattered and there's no standardization. So there is an opportunity to work towards standardization of these climate data and information, and also to bring the users and providers of service of these together. So there's this need for continued dialogue and an opportunity for engagement with these different stakeholders. Now, what do we really mean by climate services? The World Meteorological Organization defines climate services as a science-based information and forecast that empower decision makers at different levels, both to anticipate and manage climate-related shocks and opportunities. So we're looking basically at a process here. We're talking about generation of data information. You're looking at curating it. You're looking at, in terms of processing it, analyzing it, and then packaging it into different types of products, very much catered to the needs of the users, and then delivering it, disseminating it for various users, whether for making plans and policies or for operational purposes, for early warning systems, for example. Now, when you're looking at climate services, we are looking at it in different scales. It varies across in the spatial scale, at the very local level where the farmers need to use it, for example, that's the local scale. Then you have the national and the regional levels, and then the global level, where the global level, we have the Global Framework for Climate Services by WMO. And then the products that are there in place are also varying with time scales. We have the in situ or the historical data, and then at the daily or weekly levels we have the different forecast products. The real-time information also is available for early warning systems. Then we have the seasonal and the sub-seasonal and weather outlooks, and then in the future we look at the various conditions, looking at in terms of the various climate projections, for example. So now, in order to really address reducing risks and vulnerabilities and exposure, I would like to draw your attention to this framework. It is the IPCC framework, which was a part of this extreme report that came out in 2012. Has been a few years, but it is very relevant still. And now it says that the disaster risks is a function of three components. We're looking at vulnerability, we're looking at exposure, and then we're looking at hazards. Now, in order to reduce risks, we need to then reduce vulnerability, exposure, and the hazards. So all the disaster risks is basically very much dependent on various parameters in terms for reducing the risks. One is that we could have, early warning systems, people-centric early warning systems to reduce disaster risks. There could be also the need to have, appropriate knowledge base for reducing disaster risk. Partnerships is central. We need partnering with various institutions at various levels, local to national to regional levels, and also governance and mainstreaming gender into it in order to reduce disaster risk is extremely important. Using science and technology towards reducing disaster risks, as well as we're also looking at having adequate financing and investments, particularly for adaptation. Now, as part of the work that ISIMOD has been doing, we have identified some of the needs and priorities in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region when it comes to climate services. So what we have is that there's a need for strengthening capacity in the use of advanced tools and techniques, particularly looking at forecasting, data assimilation, looking at impact-based forecasting or seasonal outlooks or climate projections. And also the need to strengthen not only individual capacity, but institutional capacity, and then coordination across various actors, particularly for the use of climate information. And then tailoring these products that are available to cater to the needs of the various users. That's also very important, so that you are really, providing your best for the societal benefits for the region. And finally, looking at in terms of enhancing capacities and raising awareness at various levels, and really strengthening communication and dissemination at various levels is essential when you're looking at climate services to reach the end users. So in order to respond to some of these, what we've been doing is working at the regional level primarily. An example I wanted to share is the HKH HYCOS, that is the Hindu Kush Himalayan Hydrological Cycle Observing System, which is part of the World Meteorological Organization WICOS framework. And here we are looking at promoting regional flood early warning systems. So as part of this initiative, we've been working with the countries in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, particularly Pakistan. We're working with Nepal. We're looking at the government of Bhutan, with Bangladesh, as well as other countries in terms of addressing the need for flood early warning at the regional level. So as part of this, we've worked in modernization of the hydromet networks in terms of real-time transmission of data and information being available for timely warning by the countries. And as one of the outputs that I wanted to share with you today is the regional flood outlook. And this regional flood outlook uses some of the advanced tools and techniques, particularly the space-based observations, as well as in situ data, and also in assimilation of the data to come up with a 3-day forecast for the region as far as floods are concerned. So this is just an example that I wanted to share. So along with this, I just wanted to convey some of the 3 policy messages that we have. And this was also very much highlighted in the HIMAP report and in the call to action in the HIMAP report, which also very much resonates with the High Mountain Summit call to action that was put forth in October of last year in Geneva, which I had I was fortunate to actually participate and also contribute. So the first policy message that we have is that institutions and governments in the HKH region urgently needs to collaborate to adopt a standardized multi-hazard risk assessment approach. And I think this has come out in my presentation already. And so there's a need to co-design and co-develop services and also provide access to data and information. The second policy message is that all stakeholders, including governments, individuals, households, and communities, need to take urgent action for enhancing resilience. So by saying enhancing resilience, we have come up with the 4 I's, that is the information, infrastructure, institution, insurance. So these are the very critical 4 pillars that needs to be addressed while enhancing resilience. And we also need to very much be very sensitive, as well as address the general gender differential vulnerabilities that exist in the society, and investments is extremely critical, as also is very much highlighted in the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction. So this is important not only for climate services, but for essentially for the mountain areas to ensure that we are addressing the needs and reducing the vulnerabilities in the mountain areas. Now, the third policy message that we have is that the countries in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region needs to cooperate and communicate better, more extensively and effectively for sharing data, information, and knowledge, and by fostering transboundary disaster risk reduction practices. I already provided you with 2 examples. I think the HKH HYCOS that I just presented, and also we've been working with the Met Office on the ARC program, that's the Asia Regional Resilience to a Changing Climate, which basically addresses the needs of the users in terms of, looking at approaches to build their capacity, but also to look at how best we can also cater to the needs of the users and help the most vulnerable to use the climate information and products that are easily available for the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, for which ISIMO is very much working together with the countries in the region towards the establishment of a HKH regional climate center. So with that, I very much thank you all for your patient listening, and look forward to any questions that you may have for my presentation. Thank you very much.